this Thinking Thursdays research seminar, the first Thinking Thursdays research seminar in the new academic session. And today we have someone who is a colleague from a university here in Haryana, SGT University, Gurugram. Dr. Shekhar Tokas is an assistant professor of economics at SGT University, Gurugram. Dr. Tokas holds a doctorate and an MPhil in economics of education from Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has obtained a master's degree in economics from Jamia Millia Islamia and a bachelor's degree in economics from Hansraj College, Delhi University. Prior to joining SGTU, he held lecturerships for 5 years at the University of Delhi and Delhi Technological University. His research work primarily focuses on international student mobility, internationalization of higher education, and economics of education and health. Dr. Tokas is also the recipient of ICSSR Doctoral Fellowship awarded by the Government of India. We are really very glad to have you here with us, Dr. Tokas, though on a virtual mode. But we really hope to bring you soon, sometime very soon, to our campus here for a talk. Dr. Tokas, are you there already?
Yes, ma'am.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
So my cam is on.
The camera is on. I was able to see you, but right now I am not able to see. I don't know why. Is everybody else able to see Dr. Tokas?
Yes.
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 Yes. Now we can see you,
Okay.
Dr. Tokas. Okay. Oh, Dr. Tokas, your research is, frankly speaking, very intriguing, particularly for me, as I am also very interested in issues related to international students. As you know, I have been also doing work with international students here at OPGINDL, and I'm really looking forward to learn more from your research and looking forward to opportunities for future collaborations. You know, we would love to know more about your work to be able to develop future collaborations with you. Dr. Tokas is going to speak today on motivations and mobility experiences of international students in India, which is really a very small cohort of international students globally speaking. Those of you who have some knowledge of international education would know that. Over to you, Dr. Tokas. We're eagerly waiting to hear from you.
So thank you so much, ma'am. Before I begin, let me straight away thank you for providing this opportunity to share my work. And let me straight away start with my presentation. So you can see my screen. Hello.
Yes.
So you are able to see my screen?
Yes, absolutely. Beautifully, we can see your screen. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I have been working in the area of international student mobility for past few years now. And specifically international student mobility into India. And many people would ask me, why your work is on international students coming to India. And that is why this is because the perception is that we receive very few international students, and India is more known as a source country. So we are more known for sending students rather than receiving students. So the interesting, there is an interesting story behind this, why I chose this topic. Actually, I belong to an area called Gurugram, and this place is right in front of Jawaharlal Nehru University. And you will easily find many people from African origin. And if you are lucky enough, you are going to find people from from Europe also. So if you ask these people from Africa that what you are doing in India, they would, this is the question that I asked them almost around 10 years back. What are you doing in Gurugram? So they would straight away say that they are international students. but the fact is that many of them are asylum seekers and some of them are refugees also. On the other hand, if you ask the students from basically people from European countries that why are you in India, they would say obviously they are students, but their motivation is to explore Indian society and culture. So this was the point that gave me curiosity and kept me going. And I went to my professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University and said that, sir, this I want to work on. And some of these people are saying that they are international students, and some of them I feel that are not international students, actually. Without going into what are their actual motivations. Obviously, the ultimate concern was what was their motivations. My professor Vinod Khadria said that it is a novel area. This was in 2009, actually, when I was doing my MPhil. So it is a novel area, but challenge is that you are not going to find much research on this. No papers, no data. But if you are able to do something significant on this area, your work would be recognized. So that was the starting point for me. And let me straight away start my presentation. So if we look at the broader picture of international students in India, this is the data I have from All India Survey on Higher Education, various reports, and clearly we can see that though the number is very less, if we compare this global flow of international students, it is even less than 1% of the total global flows. But the important thing for us is that it has been increasing over the past decade. Not much, but it has been increasing. And I would say, no points for guessing what are the countries that send these students. So obviously, many of you would be guessing and saying that, yeah, Asia and Africa are the prominent regions from where we get students. And more specifically, IIHEd data, All India Survey on Higher Education, would say that 95% of international students that we receive are from Asia and Africa. And from 3 to 5% students that we receive are from developed countries. So more specifically, we can see that 50% of the students, 40 to 50% of the students that we receive are from the SAARC region. Again, this I have compiled from IIHEd data, various reports over years. And I hope that my audience knows what is SAARC. So this is an agreement of South Asian countries. So we have countries like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Myanmar, and we received, majority of students from these countries. And if you add, few African countries into this number will almost go up to 70-75%. So Asia, Africa, top 10 to 15 countries would give you 70 to 75% of international students that we receive. Now, one challenge that I faced in my PhD was that obviously this data we have, IIHEd data we have from 2011 and 12. I started my research before that. My MPhil was also on international students. And it was in 2009 to 11 I did my MPhil, and from 11 to 15 I did my PhD. So one challenge was that how do I get data? So somebody, JNU is anyways politically very active. Student activism is a lot of student activism is there. So somebody told me that why don't you file RTIs? So I went to Jaisalmer House in Delhi. That was also the office of MHA. So for my MPhil, they gave me data for only 1 year, 2009 and 10. And I could easily see that what is being reported in some articles and what is reported by government is there is a lot of underreporting actually. So, but 1 year data could not help me much. So again, for my PhD, I actually took a lot of data after 2014 when the government changed. So I could not actually, they did not allow me to enter MHA. So there was no connections I had, I could enter MHA. So I decided that I will file RTIs, right to information. Through right to information, I am going to collect my data. So I filed more than 100 RTIs in Indian embassies, Indian missions abroad, out of which I got data for 26 countries. Specifically, I was looking for data from 2010 to 15. So I find more than 100 RTIs, and I got data for 26 countries. And out of these 26 countries, 12 countries were from developed nations. So I want to bring my focus to that we receive, good number of students from developed countries also. So if you look at the upper table, clearly this is the IIHEd data, and we can clearly see the numbers in blue are actually students coming from North America, Europe, and Australasia. And in terms of percentage, this number hovers between 3 to 5%. So obviously, this is what government data says, that the number of students we receive from developed countries are from 3 to 5%. But if I replace the data for 12 developed countries that I received through RTI, we can clearly see in the bottom table, in the table below, the figures in blue, we can clearly see that if I replace the RTI, I replace the government data by RTI data, number jumps up to 15 to 18%. So clearly showing that there is lot. So these are visas, student visas issued and research visas. Research visas are very minute. Mostly it is student visas that are issued. So clearly we can see from 3 to 5, the number jumps up to 16 to 18%. So what do you think? Why do we receive international students from developed countries? Do we have world-class universities? Do we have universities having higher global rankings? Obviously, the answer is no. If I would have to say, I would say that Jindal is an exception. So if you look at the literature on international student mobility, all the existing literature that we have on your left, on the left side of your screen, you can see that the existing literature on international student mobility says that international students invest in foreign education for economic gains. And this investment or learning happens through formal education, and they are specifically accumulating subject-specific skills or disciplinary skills. In contrast, my study argues that there are students who invest in non-economic gains also. They learn through informal education. Ultimately, they accumulate social emotional skills. More specifically, human capital theory calls these as generic skills, generic and specific skills. So, for my study, I specifically have adopted human capital theory. So, this is the application of human capital theory to international student mobility. So, it is also the most dominant approach within the neoclassical framework, or if I have to say, within the international student mobility research work also, human capital theory is one of the dominant frameworks that are adopted by researchers to look at international student mobility or motivations of international students. So the focus of the, I would say, empirical studies have been to look at international students investing in formal education for economic gains. Though human capital theory also talks about investment in informal education, but application part is missing. Human capital theory, the application of human capital theory talking about investment in informal education is missing, although theory talks about informal education and it leading to economic gains. More specifically, human capital theory talks about psychic gains, or you can say non-monetary aspects. And this has been, although it does not talk about social emotional skills, but it talks about generic skills. And more specifically, a very latest study in 2016 by Russell King, who is a geographer but studies international student mobility also. This is a review report, I would say, where they have reviewed international student mobility and the related aspects, and they have highlighted about skill, bringing in the skill aspect into formal education or informal education, and there also personal and social skills he talks about. And I also, in my recent paper that is going to out very soon, it will be published by Journal of International Students in 2022. There also I have talked about it. And Tokas 2017 is my PhD thesis. So the challenge that human capital theory has faced are twofold. And the most prominent among these is that people criticize, or researchers criticize human capital theory for assumptions about self-maximization. It basically says, people say that as human capital theory comes under the neoclassical paradigm, it is all about economic gains. So I take help of Becker's quote only to defend him and my argument also. And in 1992, in his Nobel lecture, he specifically says, I quote, unlike Marxian analysis, the economic approach I refer to does not assume that individuals are motivated solely by selfishness or material gains. It is a method of analysis, not an assumption about particular motivations. So he is saying that it is a way to analyze rather than assumption about motivations of individuals. So his model of human capital theory does not say that people are interested in only economic gains. There are psychic or non-economic aspects also. More specifically, if we look at just a second. I have this.
We can see the PPT.
Yeah, but I am not able to. So yeah. So more specifically, in 1975, this is his seminal work. It is the second publication of the human capital theory that he gave in 1964. The book that was published by I think Chicago University Press, and this is the updated version in 1975. We can clearly see he says, since many persons appear to believe that the term investment in human capital must be restricted to monetary costs and returns, let me emphasize that essentially the whole analysis applies independently of the division of real earnings into monetary and psychic components. So clearly he's saying, although my work, and he also says, although my work specifically focuses on the application of his work, focuses on the economic aspect, but it is nowhere demeaning that non-economic or psychic components are less important. Second important criticism that he has faced is of methodological individualism, which says that human capital theory does not give adequate consideration to the social structure, or we would say environment, which which actually form the motivations of an individual, or specifically in this case, international students. This again, in 1994, he says that no discussion of human capital can omit the influence of families on the knowledge, skills, health, values, and habits of their children. Parents having a large influence on the education, material stability, and many other dimensions of their children's lives. Specifically, accepting the fact that human capital theory is not only about individual taking decision, the environment also helps or influences. So human capital framework includes the environment also, and more specifically, it includes environment by taking socio-economic background as stock of economic capital, stock of human capital, stock of personal and social capital, that we will see very soon. So now let me come to my results. So this study was based actually, this was multiple case study. I had 3 case studies. So first case study was JNU and JNU periphery. So I took 15 samples from JNU, 15 samples from JNU periphery. Second case study was Delhi University North Campus, and then these areas like Kamla Nagar, Civil Lines, Model Town, Mukherjee Nagar. Then case study 3 is Jamia and Jamia periphery. So I have specifically, chosen these 3 areas, keeping in mind to bring in the heterogeneity of into my data. And JNU was preferred because I could get more of European students. JNU periphery because I wanted African students. Delhi University I took because most of the students coming there are for graduation, undergrad basically, and they are from South Asia, Southeast Asian, African countries. Jamia I took because I wanted to also look at whether I can get some data from the politically unstable countries. So Jamia and Jamia. So straight away, let me come to my results. So these were the 7 major motivations into which I categorized. Let me remind you that this is a deductive way of looking at the motivations, because I was more guided by the theory and the review of literature that I did. Having said that, I do not mean that I did not take anything from the field. So especially fourth and fifth motivations, that is to seek prestige and popularity, and to learn yoga actually came from the field. So I later, after my pilot study, I added these two motivations also. So clearly we can see that first two motivations are more economic in nature, where student is interested in a quality education or international exposure, basically for economic gains. And out of 90 sample, 46 students said, or 51% of the students said that they were interested in better employment opportunities in future. And 44 students out of 90, or 49%, almost half of the students said that they had non-economic motivations, and they decided to come to India. Their motivation was never money. So within this, the primary reason was you can see the rightmost column, and the first within non-economic, first motivation within non-economic. So 21 people out of 44, that is, they said that to get personal experience and develop understanding of our society. So these were majorly, you can see under JD, you have 12 students. So these are basically from students from developed countries. Then we have many students who said that they are here for spiritual, religious, and philosophical gains. These 8 people from Delhi University, all are monks. And many are doing masters and some are doing PhDs. Obviously, I asked them, do you have economic motivations? So they were saying that our philosophy does not allow that. So the Buddhist philosophy. So these were basically from Myanmar, Indonesia, and Vanuatu, one more country was there. Island is one of the islands. And then 5 this to seek asylum, permanent settlement, or temporary stay. These 5 students were actually were from JNU periphery, all 5 from Africa, and all 5 of these were actually looking for refuge, but they were enrolled under some course here. Interestingly, they came to India on student visa. But when they came here, some of these, like under JMI, you can see 3 people are there. So these were 3 of these 3 were from Afghanistan, and they came under ICCR fellowship. But 2 were under ICCR fellowship, and another student was saying that he was basically self-financed, that he has applied for refugee certificate. Again, if you look at the 4th reason, to seek prestige and popularity. So these are 5 students, mostly from Bangladesh, in Mauritius and Sri Lanka, and they are involved in Indian art, performing art, visual arts, things like that. So they were, more seeking into prestige and popularity that they will get after completing the course at home, in home country. And 2 students were here; they were on student visa. So these are basically from JNU, and they actually wanted to learn yoga, but they are here as exchange students on student visa. So clearly, now if we look at the relationship between economic motivations and what is the preferred mode of learning, clearly we can see the rightmost column, bottom row, 78% or almost 80% students having economic motivation said that they preferred formal rather than informal learning, that is in-class learning, accumulating subject-specific skills. When we compare this to non-economic motivations and preferred mode of learning, although clearly the rightmost column, bottom row, we can see that only 52% of students are saying that they preferred informal learning. But if I include the second last column also, that 30%, it goes up to 82%. The second last column is basically the combination of both formal and informal education. Importantly, if you look at second column, only 18% students out of these 44 said that they wanted only formal education. So that is important for us. Now, I was not satisfied actually when students were saying we are here for exploring Indian society, Indian culture. I was more interested in knowing what is it that you are gaining. So those having economic motivations would say, I could gain about, let's say I'm doing computer engineering, so I have knowledge of computer engineering, I will get a good job. So what is it that you are gaining? So I then, at that time, I was reading, I was trying to, find something where I could, more theoretically, I can look at this, that what do they gain? So at that time, I read Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence book, and it basically talks about social and emotional skills. So then I again went back to narratives that students gave. So out of those narratives, I have extracted these indicators that you are seeing, which I have segregated into 6 categories. So on the left side that you see, it is more intrapersonal, and on the right side that you are seeing, social awareness, social skills, social values, this is more interpersonal. I'm not saying they are exclusive categories. There are a lot of overlaps, but this is inspired by both Gary Baker and Daniel Goleman, where I'm saying that students accumulate something like self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation. These are all skills that are to be accumulated. And on the right side, we have social awareness, social skills, and social values. Now, so this made some sense, and now I wanted to know what could be more possible reasons why students having economic motivations are behaving like this, and why students having non-economic motivations behaving the other way. So broad cross tabulation I have done. If you look at students having economic motivations, they are mainly from developing countries. They are in professional or popular courses. The preferred mode of learning is formal. If you look at their parents' occupation, they are usually in homemaking. Their mothers are in homemaking, farming. They are in petty jobs, and income is usually low. Interestingly, if you look at the second last column, international student exposure. If you look at the international student exposure of parents, siblings, and relatives, it is very similar to students having non-economic motivations. But only difference here is in terms of educational exposure, students having non-economic motivations, their peers had higher international educational exposure. And the last column is international exposure as such, not educational exposure. So those having economic motivations, their parents, siblings, relatives had lower international exposure. And in comparison, those having non-economic motivations, their parents, siblings, and relatives, peers had higher exposure, international exposure. So now, based on this, now I actually very recently, I gave this conceptual framework that this could be one way to study international student mobility. This is by me and some of my co-authors. One of them is from Jindal University only, Dr. Anand Sharma from, I think, Jindal School of Business. And here, if you look at this dashed rectangle, here I'm trying to say that students can have, this is actually making the micro level, where students can have economic and non-economic motivations. Those students having economic motivations, they invest in formal education and they expect economic gains. The students having non-economic motivations, they invest in personal experience or personal capital. Personal capital term is used by Gary Baker, so I'm using the same term. You can also treat this as more of intrapersonal in nature. And then they expect non-economic gains. Students having non-economic motivations also invest in social forces. When I say social forces, this is also again a term used by Gary Baker. You can also clearly see this as a social capital. But importantly, this is very important, personal capital and social capital for Gary Baker is within the human capital. It is a subset of human capital. He's saying that these are personal and social skills, similar to subject-specific skills that Gary Baker talks about, that it is skills, knowledge, and values that you accumulate. When you are saying human capital, what does it mean? It means skills, knowledge, and values. He says it is not only subject specific, it could be generic. When we are saying generic, it could be personal and social. Or you can say it is social and emotional. So for Gary Baker, it is subset of human capital. And thereby it will lead to non-economic gains. Now, this is at individual level. Clearly, first criticism that we saw, that the criticism about rational man looking at economic benefits only. So clearly, this demolishes that criticism. And the second criticism of methodological individualism, which says that human capital theory does not take care into account the social structure or the environment. On the left side of your panel, you will see that I have written social environment. So how do we take this into account in human capital theory? We take economic capital, or for example, let's say money of family, the money income of family. It can be taken as stock of economic capital and stock of human capital. And within human capital, we have personal social capital. So the level of stock of economic and human capital will decide what type of economic or non-economic motivations you are going to have. So this is, we have proposed, and this is going to be asked, published very soon. I think within 2 months it will be published. So what implications this has for, let's say, internationalization, because I'm also working on internationalization of higher education specifically in India. So I say that we can look at international students that are coming to India into 2 broad categories. We have students who are specifically looking at, who are specifically from developing countries and looking for disciplinary skills, subject specific skill, the last row, the bottom row you can see. And here we should be focusing more on promotion of long-term degree programs, because many students, most of the students that we receive from Asia, Africa, they are interested in long-term degrees, and they are from developing countries. But if we look at the first row, I am saying that we should also have strategies that focuses on social emotional skills accumulation. And this is specifically for students coming from developed countries, and some of the students like those who are MONC, South Asian or students from South Asia or Southeast Asian countries. So the policy objective or initiatives that government of India can take or researchers can see is, first is very common, I think, but still I think the focus has to be more on culture of exchange. Can we promote more culture of exchange? It is, for good universities, known government or private universities, it is already there. But can we also start, NEP says that you should have more interactions within India also. So can we have, let's say that SJT University have interaction with Gopichandan in terms of our students can go there, and we can also learn from their students and faculty members. Second is also very common, providing scholarship, incentives in cash. Scholarships are already there. Incentives in kind are also very important. Can we provide world-class, Jindal has very good, I would say, hostels, you have swimming pool, you have all the facilities. Can that be replicated to other private universities also? So it is I would say a lot of money is needed, but if universities can do that, I think students will also come. Importantly, I would say 2 or 3 important suggestions I have is, can we provide courses that impart social emotional skills, that specifically focuses on social emotional skills accumulation, and it could be through formal and informal education or learning also. Secondly, I also feel that there is need to foster Asian identity. So something similar to Erasmus Mundus that we have in Europe and other collaborations in Europe. And let's say we have this global studies program also, or between specific countries like, I think, South Africa, India, and Germany is there. So, because India, South Asia and Southeast Asia is cusp of Indian civilization. So I feel that can we foster same feeling in South Asia and Southeast Asia? And we should also focus on, because many students coming from developed countries, they are not interested in sitting in classrooms. They are interested in informal education. So can we have schemes where we give more experiential learning in the field rather than sitting in class? And then can we also create short-term exchange visa categories? So specifically giving more exchange, focus on more visas that are for short-term exchange. And some more implications, I would say that the study has implications for not only scholars in migration, but scholars in higher education also. So you see, this is a very famous line by Daniel Goleman. He says that only 20% of person's success can be attributed to IQ. So obviously saying that 80% is is decided by social and emotional skills, is deciding your success. So can we incorporate this into our frameworks, whether it is with respect to international student mobility or higher education? So I specifically say the application of the proposed human capital framework can open a plethora of avenues for scholars and institutions to identify and measure the indicators of personal social capital in which the students invest for economic or non-economic. The successful identification and measurement of these indicators that we receive would reveal the actual accumulation of personal and social capital by international students or students in general in higher education. Accordingly, the educational and mobility related institutions can form appropriate policies that cater to not only the accumulation of discipline specific human capital, but also personal and social capital. So that is all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shekhar Tokas. That was really very well presented, very comprehensive. And we have many of our students and faculty over here in this meeting room today. I can see several of them, and particularly Dr. Kalyani Unkale is here. Who is also someone very interested in international education and has been working in this area, even in a admin position. She was heading our international office and up until very recently, and has also published a very important book on this, and particularly which looks at social and emotional, which seeks to prioritize that kind of learning as part of international education over and above other kinds of learning. So I would now throw open this entire room for questions from our audience, and only after the audience questions are over, then I'm going to ask my questions and share my comments. So first question from, there are a few hands up there. We have a couple of our students and research fellows, Sandal Agarwal and Gauri Khanna. But Kalyani, would you like to ask before?
I've actually made a bunch of notes, but I would like to hear, if we can take questions from students first. I don't want to immediately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Gauri, go ahead, and then Sandal.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for this amazing session, and thank you for sharing about your study in so much detail. So I was really just curious to know that when you were conducting this study, did you come across any student who wanted to continue working in India after completing their higher education? Because I think this might give us better understanding about their economic motivations. And also, since India is now trying to promote internationalization of its higher education through our new education policy, I think if we know more about this, that if these students who come to India, if they also want to continue working in India, this might also have a policy implication on India's work visa process, like in UK and Canada and other countries who offer work visas to their international students after they complete higher education from their country's colleges.
Yeah, can I respond?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So obviously very, I would say very important question with respect to internationalization of higher education. See, if specifically it is very clear for students having economic motivations, obviously, and within economic motivations also, students who are interested in that we don't have opportunity to work in India. And I would say I did not go into whether non-economic students having non-economic motivations who are looking for job, but some of my participants, specifically from France and Germany, they said that they were actually looking at India's policy. They had looked at it, and there is no, no way to work in India or to come, again and again. So they were, some of them were very, this was not my actually motive to look at, but some of them revealed, I would say only 2 to 3 people revealed, specifically from France and Germany. They said that they wanted to continue in India, but there is no, they don't have any scope, or they don't have any opportunity to work. And I should also say that though students coming from developed countries, they are saying that they want to accumulate social emotional skills. But ultimately, whether they want it or not, accumulation of social emotional skills will help them in job also. So very few had idea about this, because I simply said that, what is your motivation to come to India? So they said that they chose India because they wanted to socially and culturally explore India. But I have this gut feeling that this can help, and India can exploit this also. That, as you know, that 80% of your success depends on social emotional skills. We have a special plan for you. Please come to India. And we have a very multicultural society. very diverse society, India is the best place to accumulate social emotional skills. So something like that would be, important policy implication actually with respect to education policy and international issues.
Thank you, Dr. Tokas. Sandal, go ahead first, quickly.
Hello, sir. Good evening. So, sir, when you have talked about the preferences, the economic motivations and non-economic motivations and the data set, I want to know whether there was an overlap of these responses from international students where they would or would not have like a first preference of choosing the economic motivations or the non-economic motivations to invest in the foreign education.
So, can I respond?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So, Sandal, see, I took for top 3 preferences of each individual. Okay, I have shown only top preference, but if we go into including the top 3 preferences, you would see that those economic motivations, they will also include non-economic motivations into their second and third preference. So number will go up. So for simplicity, I have shown only first preference. So that is there.
All right, Sandal, I hope he has answered your question. We'll now
Yes,
move to Dr. Kalyani Umpule.
Yeah, thank you so much, Moshmi. And Dr. Tokas, I was really, really impressed with your work and the way you presented it. And it is undeniably such an important area that you're working on, especially the fact that you're doing so much data collection and groundwork and all of that. I think that is certainly immensely valuable and really lays the groundwork
I
for...
plan to do it again. And then do a comparative study.
Fantastic. So really, lays the groundwork to, build up the field in our context. I do have a couple of, thoughts that I wanted to share with you, but these are just really coming from my very hardline stance on these issues. Okay, so I just want to open with that. First of all, it struck me, what you said very early on, that a lot of displaced and refugee element in the student population, right? And everybody now in the field is like, this is the emerging kind of theme, and people are just like, oh my God, like what are we going to do with the growing number of displaced scholars and students? And here we are, like we've had this for like decades and decades and centuries, and we need to really highlight that, really take a hard look at what that experience really is and how we share those lessons. I think this is a very important takeaway for me from your presentation. Coming to human capital, I would love to read your entire paper to get exactly how you operationalized your critique, etc., etc. But one other area within which I would situate your work is critical internationalization studies. I found that, okay, here's what I think. I think if we are studying internationalization in India or international students in India, we should do that with the express purpose of flipping the script on the current narrative of internationalization.
I totally agree.
Absolutely, like pull the rug out from under the establishment line on this, okay? Right?
I would say basically decolonizing.
Absolutely, and I had a couple of just thoughts on how, and this is stuff that I'm working my way through when I constantly address on every forum that I'm, that I have, space to kind of speak and all of that. First of all, again, this would entail approaching with a lot of caution these kind of binary distinctions like sending and receiving. Right? How can we write up our experience in a way that really bypasses these established categories, and other binaries like developed and developing, and maybe like avoid pitfalls like students coming from developing countries can get this from us and students coming from developed countries can get this from us, because that's like positioning ourselves in the same way that all of these big players, big sectors are already doing, which is exactly what has made them so vulnerable in the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 context. So even from a policy and practice standpoint, like we don't want to go there, right? We have the examples now in front of our eyes as to what happens when you go down that road, and what a house of cards it is. What a house of cards it is. Okay.
Yes.
So I think we need to be very careful about, these binary distinctions and like drawing on them in our work. Coming to social emotional skills, I think this is one area which is immensely interesting to me, but how do we even operationalize experiential learning in a way that we can demonstrate our rigor, right? In a way that we can stand at par with, confidently with all types of learning, right? And not have to not have to even justify it, okay? Make it much more integral to any kind of rigorous definition of learning. And within that, like, how do we establish the link between experiential learning or being in new context or the intercultural encounter and that resulting in experiential learning? Because we pretty much throw the student in at the deep end of the pool and say, wow, we're sending you into a new society, obviously you learn something new, and therefore we shall call it experiential learning. I mean, we haven't really, done much by way of like trying to connect the two. And this is the last point I'll make, although I had like so many other thoughts which I could barely keep up with, even taking notes. Dr. Tokas, do we still have you? I feel like your screen
Yes,
is
I'm
frozen.
there. I'm there.
Okay. Your screen is frozen, and so I thought we may have lost you. Last point is, if we are going to quote unquote market ourselves as this society which, where you can learn a lot from, there's a huge ethical implication of that as to what does then that society gain from internationalization, right? And what are our responsibilities as institutions, that we are not just, we are not just selling our rich society and our poverty porn and our, all of that, and trying to attract people based on that, and like playing up those stereotypes, reinforcing those stereotypes about like, you come to India to get XYZ even more, and also while at the same time being accountable to, what we are indirectly, how we are indirectly benefiting from our social context in terms of our enriched learning environment. And do we as institutions give back for that? Do we as institutions repay our society, reinvest in our society for that? Which I don't even want to go. I mean, go down that road, like time for, conversation for another day. But yeah, I mean, this is great that it's so lovely to meet, to grow your community in this way, as Moshmi was saying, that, it's such a delight to get to know about our work. And for sure, big fan of the Asian collaboration, the Asian exchanges, and big fan of your idea of our interinstitutional within, collaborations. And maybe we should start that. We should go there first. We as colleagues assembled here today. Thank you, Moshmi.
Thank you, Kalani, for your thoughts and comments. I would now like to first invite Dr. Tokas to share his thoughts and reflections based on what you just said. Dr. Tokas, are you still with us? Okay, I think he has dropped out briefly. I'm sure he's going to join in again with the link. I'm sure he's going to be back with us. But anybody else would like to ask a question to Dr. Tokas by the time he's back? Anybody else? Any of the students? Yes, Dr. Tokas is getting back. I can see him joining again. The link.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Tokas, welcome back.
So I missed the last comment.
Well, Kalyani was just thanking for this webinar to be able to connect with you even virtually. But next time, definitely, hopefully, we will bring you to our campus, and we need. And she said that she really likes your idea about inter-university collaborations. Within Asia and also within our own country, like universities in Haryana, like your university, our university, and particularly to grow the body of literature, which you are really and the empirical data which you're really pioneering with your work. Would you like to share something, some reflections and thoughts based on what Kalyani just said? In a way, she has kind of destabilized the categories of developed and developing and all the categories in which you had segregated your data, drawing from the mainstream literature. She is kind of she's talking about destabilizing those, coming up with a new way of looking at even the sending country and receiving country. So she is somebody who talks about destabilizing all these mainstream binaries coming out of the mainstream literature of international higher education, which really comes out primarily out of North America and Europe and Australia and these places. So your thoughts on this, Dr. Tokas?
Yes, ma'am. I would try to respond some of these. See, so your first point was regarding displaced and refugee students. So let me tell you that I actually tried to write something on, I call them forced migrant students. And I submitted my piece to, this is FMR, Forced Migration Review, published by Oxford University of Oxford. So it was actually, they did not accept it. So there I have actually shared this idea that how do we theorize this within the human capital framework. So human capital framework, one of the components in human capital framework is migration. Mobility itself is one of the components of when you invest money in mobility. So these people coming from politically unstable countries, this could be theorized as investment in mobility, and mobility is one of the component of human capital investment, as defined by Gary Becker and T.W. Schultz. Both are Nobel laureate in economics of education. This is one thing, and I want to work so much into this area that this area of students coming from politically unstable countries. Then you also talk about that this could fall into critical internationalization studies, internationalization of internationalization of higher education. And see, on this also I'm trying to write a paper, and I have read a lot about which discourse to follow. And so there is a lot of writing where specifically scholars from developing countries, I think not directly, but Professor Mukherjee's work is also on that with respect to decolonization. How to decolonize this, actually the way of the narrative or the way we present our research. So a lot of research, not lot of, but some people are writing within this field. Where I recently read a paper published in 2021 by some guy from, I think based in US, from Chinese origin, where he has looked at internationalization from Chinese perspective. So why not contextualized in Indian setting? Decolonize this the Western narrative of internationalization. Why not have our own narrative? So I'm trying to work on that also. So I totally agree with you on that. And you talked about operationalization. How do we operationalize, let's say, if somebody is accumulating social emotional skills, so how do we operationalize the experiential learning? So I think there is some research on this also with respect to, although see, philosophically I agree with you why to have these distinctions as formal and informal education? Why not have whole education as experiential learning? But I think that also can be measured through experimental research that is happening. If we can have ourselves more trained in, I think, experiential research, more specifically natural experiments, then I think even we, although the argument is there that we have to look at all the learning as experiential learning, but we can operationalize that also. And yeah, see, the last point regarding the ethical implications of this and categorizing, providing enriching learning environment, why to focus more mainly on profit. I think as of now, Government of India stand has been more with respect to mutual, emphasizing more on mutual understanding. And there is no profit orientation as of now. But obviously, as we see in Western countries, the aim is to earn money. So if India emerges, let's say, regional hub, educational hub, so ultimately that would also be India's aim. So, but obviously you have valid point in the sense that what is it that internationalization, if let's say that more students come to India, what is it that we can contribute? What is it that this internationalization can contribute to our education system, and how our society or our higher education can contribute to international students of their institutions. So that is the valid point.
Thank you, Dr. Tokas, for your response and the presentation. I think these dialogues are very, very important right now at this stage of higher education, Indian higher education, with all the reform discourse floating around and the new national education policy. I think the body of literature that scholars like you, they are trying to build, and also the critical voice that Kalyani has been bringing, someone like Kalyani from the very beginning. I personally, through my own work, I think it's very, very important. And as Kalyani rightly pointed out, if the leaders and policymakers would look at the countries in the middle of the pandemic, the kind of policy of international education they have been following, and what kind of impact it has had on the entire economy and the society, and how they're still reeling from it, frankly speaking. I hope that they better learn their lessons. And India already has a glorious history of internationalization. This is something not just Kalyani, I also talk about in many forums, whereas the established mainstream, what is known as the canon of literature on international education, which you can find through library search and Scopus Index journals and all, they're all coming out of the West. Whereas there has been a definitive tradition of internationalization within our own context, dating thousands of years back, during the time of universities like Nalanda and others, which are of course extinct now. And we have had a distinct tradition of international exchange and international education, which is of course not part of the canon of established literature. I think it's important for us to look into our own history, reflect critically on the road internationalization of higher education has taken in the West, what its consequences have been in the middle of the pandemic and even pre-pandemic. There has been critical voices, even coming out of the West, critiquing their own policies and of internationalization. Even senior scholars like Altbach and Hans Tibet, and they're all writing about it. So so I think it's important for us to join hands. Let's keep this dialogue going. And I personally had a few more things to share, but we are running out of time. I have to also rush to teach a class because I have been looking at international students also in terms of samples of international students. In fact, one of the first sample of international student I studied also comes from refugee background, asylum seeking background, the Tibetan students, very interesting community of
yes.
students in India. You look at in government data, they don't appear visible there because obviously because it's under Chinese occupation. So there are lots of serious issues that I found as I interviewed and spoke with students with regards to identity also, cultural identity, political identity, all kinds of identity related issues. I think we need to look at these students' experiences deeply, for the future and keep this dialogue going. And I thank all of you, those of you who joined for this webinar. And primarily, I really thank you so much, Dr. Tokas, for accepting my invitation to deliver. When I spoke with you, we were still not functioning in a fully open mode as a campus. So I talked about a webinar. Now I'm thinking, why did we plan it as a webinar? We could have really had you on our campus here because our campus is fully open from this semester. So this is something it didn't just strike at the time when we planned for this webinar, but we hopefully, definitely in the near future, we would like to have you at our campus and do some work collaboratively, and really look forward to that. And let's keep this dialogue going. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I also really appreciate, you have been very encouraging. You also encouraged me. You encouraged me to present also. You encouraged me to publish in JIS also. So
yeah, because I personally realize it's an important work. There's so little literature coming out of India. There is so data, as you mentioned yourself, so little data is there. We need to build that body of literature. We're constantly reading a literature that is coming out of completely a different context altogether with regards to internationalization. And our policymakers are also, cut and pasting certain policy prescriptions based on empirical literature coming out a completely different context, which really doesn't apply over here. And that creates a whole set of problems for all of us.
I actually recently attended a conference on national education policy. And this ICCR president, Dr. Vinay Saraswati, was there. And he was talking about actually making India a hub and internationalization. Although he could not give me much time, I mailed him also, but there is no response. So, see, this is also one area, internationalization of higher education. And currently also I'm writing a paper on that, and more specifically how to decolonize it. So obviously I would like to collaborate, whether it is international student mobility, whether it is specifically displaced and refugee students, and internationalization of higher education. So these are three areas I think we can collaborate on.
Great,
and
great. Let's
more
keep
specifically
this dialogue.
taking guidance from.
Great, thank you so much. Let's keep this dialogue going. We'll keep communicating. I'll drop you a mail soon after this webinar, after I'm done with my class. And thank you, Kalyani, also for joining. I can see my colleague Deepak also. He is here. Raju, who did a lot of legwork for organizing this webinar, and all of you who have joined. Thank you all. You wanted to say something, Dr. Tokas, before we wrap up?
I wanted to take one picture. So
oh, you wanted?
I wanted to take, yeah.
Okay, okay. Don't worry. We have taken a lot of screenshots. We will share this with you. Okay.
Thank you.
You can. We'll definitely share the screenshots with you over the email. But right now I have to rush to a class, so please wait. So later in the evening, you will get the screenshots over the email. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening, and till we organize the next Thinking Thursday seminar. Keep thinking. Okay. Bye-bye.
Hello.